So turns out there's so many tactical boots. We plan on doing a tactical boot series, but there's like hundreds of different tactical boots and tons of different brands. And so I thought for the first part of this, to see if there's actually some interest in tactical boots, I'd buy up maybe the 5 most available tactical boots. So I went to like cabelas and sporting goods stores and all these different places to see which boots were there the most, and a range from as cheap as you can get them up to the most expensive ones you can get, because there's so many different features and types of tactical boots and little gimmicks on everything that it's almost impossible. It'd take me 3 years to do an individual video on each one. So this video, we're gonna take these 5 boots, run them through a bunch of tests that are somewhat applicable to tactical use, and cut them in half to see how they're structured and really start figuring out this tactical boot market. And thanks to Magic Spoon for sponsoring this video. They've sponsored more videos. They've been the longest running sponsor we've ever had, and it's because I love Magic Spoon, and I'm not just saying that because it's an ad. It really is good. Literally, we got our last shipment in, and before I even had the opportunity to tell everyone, don't eat the Magic Spoon, we need footage of the boxes before we start eating them, the peanut butter was already broken into by Sam, and since then it's pretty much all but gone, mostly because I've been eating it, but yeah. So it is a sponsor that we really like, and they've been really supportive of the channel, and it's because it's something I actually enjoy eating, because it has 0 grams of sugar, 13 to 14 grams of protein per serving, and only has 4 to 5 net carbs per serving. And it's also gluten-free and grain-free and has no artificial flavors. And they're always coming out with new flavors, and you can build your own variety pack, but you can choose the cocoa, the fruity, the frosted, cookies and cream, maple, waffle flavors, plus even new flavors like honey nut, blueberry muffin, and cinnamon roll. And you can even add cookies and cream and cocoa peanut butter. And that's the nice thing, is they have the variety pack that you can build, where you can just try whatever flavors you want, try a bunch of different stuff until you find your specific flavors that you love. So click the link below to get your Magic Spoon cereal today, and you can build your very own variety pack. And if you use the code ROSEANVIL, it saves you $5 on your variety pack. They have a 100% happiness guarantee, so if you don't like it for any reason, you get your money back guaranteed. So it's an easy way to support the channel by trying out Magic Spoon, and it's an easy way to eat healthier but not sacrificing flavor. So check them out via the link below, and thanks again to Magic Spoon for sponsoring this video. We've got the 511s, the 3.0, the 8-inch, and they retail for about $100. They're a lightweight, breathable, moisture wicking. They claim it has odor control lining that's oil and slip resistant. It's got a leather and nylon upper, and they say it's perfect for work, the range, and personal wear, and it's got a fence climbing toe. Next is the Danner Tachyon 8-inch. And this is a really lightweight one. It retails for $170, and it has a 100% rubber for superior abrasion resistance and pentagonal lugs, 100% waterproof and breathable, Gore-Tex liner, and it's they say it's a full grain leather, and it has a polyurethane footbed, and it has but the weird thing is it says it has a polishable synthetic leather. So I don't know what that is. Next up is the Under Armour UA Micro G Valset Zip. It retails for $140, and they say it's a lightweight, durable, and breathable boot that has a welded forefoot with a molded TPU toe and for added protection. This has tons of different stuff. It has a medial zip and a pull loop. It's got anti-fatigue and antimicrobial molded Insight Cortora support footbed with shock-absorbing foam. Full-length Micro G foam midsole for ultimate long-lasting responsive cushioning, oil and slip resistant traction, rubber lug, outsole, enhanced grip and variety, also octagon-ish. So lots of marketing jargon. We'll see if it's real or not. Next is the Merrell, and this is the Moab 2, the 8-inch. It retails for $160. They say it has a waterproof membrane that seals out the water. It's got a waterproof PU coating, and it has a ripstop textile upper. It has a protective and abrasion-resistant rubber heel and toe cap, breathable mesh lining, Merrell air cushioning in the heel that absorbs shock and adds stability. It has a Kinetech Fit advanced removable contoured insole. Finally, it has external lateral stability arms with spray rubber. I have no idea what that means. And then finally, to the big daddy of the group, the most expensive one is the Lowa Zephyr. It retails for $250. I couldn't find this one in black, unfortunately. It has a leather and fabric upper. It's supposed to be durable, breathable, waterproof Gore-Tex lining. It has an injection molded Dura PU midsole. It also has the PU mono wrap frame construction, which I assume is these sawtooths here. And they say it's an ideal boot for moving quickly over tough terrain. So, lots and lots of marketing jargon that we don't know if it's real or not, or if it's just spinning terrible materials. So the first thing we need to do is figure out what the quality of leather is. So we'll start with the 511s first. So let's do a little burn test on the canvas and the leather as well. So we burned the upper first, and obviously it's a synthetic upper, so it just melted and kind of clumped up, but it was fairly self-extinguishing. As for the leather, it seems like there's two different qualities of leather, because the leather on the Vamp clearly has a heavy coating of polyurethane on top, but once you got down there you could see some of the natural leather color underneath. But the heel, it doesn't have that same color underneath, so I think they're saving a little bit of money by putting a cheaper leather on the heel counter. Next to the danner, so the upper fabric just lit up like crazy. That stuff is definitely flammable. And then we tested the leather on the boot, and it is actually leather, and you can see it's almost exactly the same as the 511. So I'm almost wondering if this is like the same tannery or something, because it's very similar leather. And if you look at the cross section, it is a full grain leather. You can see that little grain pattern on there. Part of why the upper lit up so fast is because it's really lightweight, and it actually looks really similar to the Vietnam jungle boot. It basically is modeled right after that with a little bit flatter sole. Next up is the Under Armour, and since the upper is kind of like that spacer mesh that has a couple different layers fused together, it clearly just lit up like crazy and just kind of melted away, which was interesting. So then we tested the leather, and as you can see, it just melts away, so it's clearly fake leather, and I think they advertise it as fake leather, but even still, for a tactical boot, you'd hope that there's some real leather on there. Next to the merrell, so the upper did take a little bit longer to burn because of that layer of that rubber on top that's the abrasion resistant, like honeycomb pattern. But it did eventually burn, obviously. And then we tested the leather, and the leather has so much polyurethane on top. It's still sticky after the test. And we didn't even get down to the leather because they have such a heavy coating on top. Part of that is for the look, part of that is for the durability, but also if you look at the cross section, it's not the nicest leather. If there is a grain pattern in there, it's very, very slight. And then finally to the lowas. So obviously, once again, the fabric upper burned fairly quickly, but maybe not quite as quick as some of the other ones. And the leather performed the best out of all of them because it is a real natural suede. There's no fake polyurethane on top that's gonna burn and melt. It took a long time to actually burn through this because there's no artificial, there's no synthetic materials in the leather. And that's why leather is a really good material for these tactical boots, because it's one of the most abrasion resistant, heat resistant, flame resistant, wear resistant materials that you can use. But to me, it is the highest quality leather out of the bunch because it doesn't have that fake coating on top. Even though some of these boots still had a grain, I would still rather have a real natural leather than a cheap coated full grain leather. And as for the leather thicknesses, they're all basically the same, except for the Under Armours because it's not real leather, but they're all about 1.2, 1.3 millimeters thick. But obviously these are lightweight and they're supposed to be a little bit more breathable, a little bit more flexible, so it's understandable, but I thought for sure there'd be a little bit thicker leathers. But speaking of waterproofness of these, because some claim they're waterproof and some don't say anything about it, so we dunked them all in the tank, starting with the 511 first. 511, not waterproof. Danners were really waterproof. Under Armour was maybe the worst because they're not waterproof, and this upper almost acts like a sponge. You know, it's not just a thin canvas upper or anything, it acts like a sponge holding all that water in. If you're gonna be around water at all, the Under Armours are terrible. The merrells are similar where they absorb a lot of water, but they are waterproof, so that water doesn't get to the inside of the boot. And the lowas were also waterproof and still absorbed some water, but not nearly as much as the merrells and the Under Armours. And the 511s don't claim they're waterproof, and neither do the Under Armours, but I still think for a tactical boot, it's worth knowing how waterproof they actually are. But one test that is really interesting, especially for these boots where people are gonna be wearing these with heavy backpacks, rucking around, doing tactical stuff, you wanna know how much impact resistance and how much energy return comes from each of these soles. So we did the bar drop test on each of them, and the 511s, we dropped it, bounced back up 6.5 inches. The Danners bounced back up 6.25 inches. The Under Armours bounced back 6.75 inches. So those three are fairly similar, similar rebound rates and similar cushioning. Then the merrells went back up 8 inches, and it went so high it went back up into the tube because we didn't expect it to bounce that much. And the lowas did the exact same thing. And so it seems like there's a split down the middle where the Under Armour and down don't have quite as much rebound in the foam versus these higher quality, more expensive brands with the lowas and the merrells. have a little bit higher quality foam and a little bit better structure for that energy return. And we also wanted to test how durable these eyelets are, because there's nothing worse, because when I was a firefighter, there's nothing worse than a broken lace or pulling through an eyelet, because you don't realize how much you depend on your boots until you can't use your boots and you're just stranded. And so for a tactical boot, we wanted to see how much it took to pull through an eyelet. So the 511s, it was 118.6 pounds. The Danners were the real shocker though. It took 220 pounds to rip through the eyelets. The Under Armours took 172 pounds. The Merrells took 175 pounds. And the Lowas were the surprising one. It only took 145 pounds to pull through their speed hooks here. And part of that might be because this is just a suede leather, because the eyelet didn't actually break. It just pulled through the leather. Whereas a lot of these other boots are riveted through several layers and not just the leather. So maybe a little bit of a design flaw there. Maybe it was made for the weather resistance, or maybe for comfort. But if you get the Lowas, just don't pull too hard. You'll pull those eyelets right out of your boots, if you're really strong. Next to another important test for tactical boots, the puncture resistance of the soles. So we rigged it up in the arbor press, and so we started with the 511s. The 511s took 153.5 pounds. The Danners took 144.5 pounds. The Under Armours underperformed at 110 pounds. The Merrells did even worse at 105 pounds. And the Lowas did the best out of all of them at 176.5 pounds. So it's kind of shaping up like the Merrells and the Under Armours are kind of the underperformers in all these tests. And they're the most kind of spongy, especially the Under Armours. The Under Armours are not looking good so far. But there's still some hope. We got a few more tests. So we wanted to also test the upper puncture resistance of the material that the upper is made out of. And so we started with the 511s again, and it took 64.5 pounds. The Danners only took 10 pounds. The Under Armour took 58.5 pounds. The Merrells, we tested both. The mesh took 57 pounds and the leather took 89 pounds. And the Lowas took 48 pounds for the mesh and 77 pounds for the puncture. So the Merrells redeeming themselves a little bit. The Danners not puncture resistant at all, but it is a really lightweight. Like this is the lightest weight of the entire group. So keep that in mind when you're looking at these boots. But these tests only mean so much, because it doesn't matter how puncture resistant your upper is if they're super uncomfortable boots or if they're just not built to the same quality. So that's what we're going to find out next, is by cutting these in half and see how these boots are actually built. Okay, we got them all chopped up. So let's start with the 511s first. Get this tongue out of the way. So it turns out all these boots are built almost identically. They're very similar boots except for the 511s. The 511s have this classic way of doing cheap shoes where you've got the different structure on the inside with the heel having a separate piece of foam, and then you've got your lasting board and shank and foam on top. And that's about the cheapest way to make a boot, because you don't have to injection mold it. You just get the outsole and cement it all together and fill it full of foam. But the rest of these boots are all injection molded foam midsoles with the rubber outsole with varying thicknesses and densities. But they're all kind of the same boot, to be honest. So to quickly go through the different thicknesses, the Danner's outsole is about 5.6 millimeters thick at the thickest, but pretty thin at these spots where there's not lugs. And the amount of foam in the heel is about 12.5 millimeters, and there's really not a lot of foam underneath of the ball of your foot. But you do have that composite shank and the lasting board above that to give you a little bit more structure. The Under Armours are thick. And all these shoes surprisingly don't have much of a heel, especially these Under Armours. The outsole is about 5.7 millimeters thick and a little bit thicker than the Danner's in between each of the lugs, but even still, not as thick as I expected for a tactical boot. And the foam itself is 18.7 millimeters thick, so almost an inch and a quarter of foam throughout this boot, and especially under the ball of your feet. So Under Armour, a little underperforming in the test initially, but now that we've got it cut in half, a lot of foam in here, a lot of comfort. And then if we move to the merrells, they're kind of in between the Danner's and the Under Armours with a fair amount of foam through the midsole, but the outsole is a lot thicker. The merrell's outsole is 6.8 millimeters thick at the lugs, and the foam in the heel is just a little bit thicker than the Under Armour's at 19.3 millimeters, but it does taper down just a little bit more at the ball of the foot than the Under Armour's. And it still has the composite shank, it still has your lasting board in there with a little bit of foam underneath. But basically the same as the Under Armours. And then finally to the lowas. The lowas have the most heel of the boots and the thickest foam in the heel. The outsole is 5.8 millimeters thick, so pretty on par with the rest of them. The foam in the heel is 23 millimeters thick and slowly tapers down underneath the ball of your foot. But it looks like it's a two-step injection molding process where that shank is injected first and then the midsole is above that. And each of these boots have a slightly different durometer. We'll just put it up behind us, but the durometer only means so much, because if you have this much foam in the Under Armours compared to how little foam the Danner's have, it's going to have a completely different feel no matter what the durometer of the foam actually is. So looking at how these shoes are built, they're all cemented, they're all mostly foam constructions, which is really good for a tactical boot, because a lot of times you have so much weight on your back, or you're doing such long hikes or whatever people do in tactical boots, you want a really comfortable boot underfoot. But there's basically three different types of comfort underfoot. You've got the 511s that have the worst comfort. It's just the rubber structure on the inside. And to be fair to 511, this is the cheapest boot I think that they offer. And I think some of their other boots are higher quality. So if this video does well, we'll probably revisit a 511, a more expensive one. But the Danner's are also in their own class because they have such little foam. It gives you a little bit more of a barefoot feel. You can feel the ground underneath your foot a little bit more, but you don't get quite as much squish and comfort. And then the Under Armour's, merrells, and lowas just are packed with foam. You've got plenty of foam in there. They're really similar to like a Blundstones or the Redback boots, where if you like the really squishy underfoot feel, all three of these boots have really squishy, soft midsoles. And so really when it comes down to it, if we look at each of these boots, the best leather out of the bunch is probably the lowas, even though it didn't perform as well with the Eyelet test. For a tactical boot, the best leather is the lowas. For the weight, the Danner's are by far the most lightweight, the most like a ninja boot. For water use, the Danner's, the merrells, and the lowas are gonna work fine, but you wanna stay away from the Under Armours for sure, because this is just like walking around in a sponge, and it is not good. And as for the energy return of those foam midsoles, the lowas and the merrells are the best. Then as for puncture resistance, really the merrells were the only ones that didn't do great. And obviously the Under Armours didn't do great either, but after doing this video, they're not really much of a tactical boot. They're just kind of a black Under Armour boot and not really tactical. So overall, if we look at each of these boots, which is the best tactical boot out of the bunch? Well, not surprisingly, the most expensive ones, the lowas, to me are the best and the most durable. It has all the features that you need. It's waterproof, it's comfortable. Do these polyurethane sawtooths do anything? Probably not. One thing I didn't mention about these boots is we tried to do the Eyelet rip test on the webbing right here, and it wouldn't work. We couldn't break them. They kept breaking all the different setups we had. So even though the top eyelets pulled through, this still is by far the best boot of the bunch. Is it worth twice the price of some of these boots? I don't really know. I think unless you're really, really needing to spend a lot of time in these boots, you could probably get away with some of these other boots. Really, when it comes down to, if you take all the nitpicking out and all the tests, they're essentially the same boot. And so that's interesting to me because I'm like, do all these tactical boot companies just make the exact same boot and just brand it different way with different panels of leather and it's all essentially the exact same thing? It's kind of looking that way. This, to me, this video is just part one of a 3-part series where we cut apart 5 in this video. The next video we'll cut apart 5 more, and we'll take all of them and just really choose and really have a final video. So if you like this and you want to see another one, I definitely need your support on this video because how much was this? Like almost, I think it was like $1,000 to do this video. So thank you guys for all your support, especially on the old school military videos. Those videos are doing really well. So if you haven't seen those, check them out. But your support's the only reason we can buy $1,000 worth of boots just to cut them apart and test them to show you guys what you're spending your hard-earned money on. And more importantly, to show you what you don't want to spend your hard-earned money on and what to avoid. So thank you guys for everything. See ya.